What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Game Time Discussions. I'm Cameron Selby. Sitting here, we are going to go through some fantasy content today. We are going to jump into our love and hate videos, starting off with some pessimism and go with the hate route. 1.0, this is going to be more so best ball ADP because it is still, even though we are just getting into June, way too early to judge and predetermine with ESPN, Yahoo, Sleeper, or whatever redraft league or platform that you have. At the end of the day, best ball is the best way to find out true ADPs because people are investing money every single day. We do so DraftKings every single Thursday night going forward. If you wanted to join us on the live stream, it's going to be a whole lot of fun. Please like, comment, subscribe. Let us know how you feel. We want to join this community. And then on this video, tell me where I'm right. Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me something that you are really not optimistic about based on where they're currently going in drafts. But I would say let's get right into it. So starting off, we're going to go somebody who had a bit of a resurgence last year in Darnell Mooney. Obviously, after a couple down years in Chicago where he had to combine 3 touchdowns in 2 seasons and really just had nothing to show for it after just frustrating ends to the Justin Fields tenure. Goes into Atlanta in his first season, basically as the clear-cut wide receiver 2, especially after Rondale Moore had a preseason season-ending injury. He was pretty clear-cut just going to be the second wide receiver, get 90% of the snaps, and he was going in the 130s to 160s throughout most of the best ball season last year, if I remember correctly. And so obviously he by far returned on value as a wide receiver 31, had some really strong games, basically tied a season high, or a career high, rather 5 touchdowns, and he even had a primetime game, which was a whole lot of fun, where he had a 3 touchdowns, 16 target game. That was one of the bangers between the Bucs and the Falcons. And right now, it's just kind of one of those weird things. It's not necessarily I hate him as a player. I'm pessimistic about him because it's not like they really added anybody that's going to be a threat. On top of that, Kyle Pitts could be on the move. Who knows with that? But we've seen kind of some scuttlebutt there. And also, it's a new regime, Michael Penix. Who knows? Maybe there's more optimism in terms of the passing volume, and it's a better fit than what Kirk Cousins was and did show throughout his early part, which is why he ended up getting benched towards the end of the season. But with Darnell, this is more so about kind of where he's going in terms of the range. Wide receiver wise, he's kind of in a dead zone after the 9th round. It's a lot of just, hey, this is really where you want to be tackling quarterbacks. I mean, there's still a lot of formidable, serviceable QB1s from the Kyler Murray all the way to the Caleb Williams, Dak Prescott, Jared Goff. All these guys are going in that range. In terms of tight ends, there's a lot of good ones that are, low-end tight end ones, or you really want to start ramping it up because if you didn't grab a dominant one in the first 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds, obviously you're going to need to grab a couple of these guys. So this is where the range where all of them start becoming available. And there's really not it's a slim pickings in terms of receivers. So it's the duo of the Colts guys, and then we're guessing on rookies like Jaden Higgins, Jack Besh, and all these guys that I'm not sure what to do with them. Obviously, I feel more comfortable with Darnell Mooney than those guys, but he's going, at the very tip and start of this, at the end of the 9th round, early 10th, or even on Underdog. He's going right around the 7-8 turn, which is very interesting. And I did cheat a little bit. I did say that this isn't a redraft video in terms of ADPs because it is too early, but I did check in terms of Yahoo because this is the epitome of a good best ball player versus a redraft player, because you don't know when Darnell Mooney is going to have 16 targets and 130 yards and 3 touchdowns, but maybe he'll have 0 catches on 1 target like he did in week 16. You just never know with guys like these. And so when you don't have to worry about, hey, selecting a starter for a matchup, and it is just the best 4 to 5 scores for your skill players to be inserted into your lineup for that week, this is a good guy that gets a little bit of a bump. But in terms of Yahoo ADP, I checked it out. He's about 130 right now. So that's about 3 to 5 rounds different than where he's currently going in DraftKings and Underdog, respectively. Wide receiver 4750, that is right around the range of where I would select, or I would place him in terms of wide receiver rank. It's not a huge value. And on top of that, I'm really building my roster differently to where I'm not targeting my wide receiver 5 that often right there. But jumping over, we're going to transition into a rookie running back, Bhayshul Tuten. He's the talk of the OTAs and minicamp right now for the Jacksonville Jaguars. His ADP is just shocking to us based on where we had him pre-draft in terms of rank among his position. Obviously, this is a historical draft, and people outside of our top 25, there's a good chance that there's some that will have success. Bhayshul, he was overdrafted in our eyes as an early day 3 pick, and really, man, it's hard to just say he's going to automatically insert himself as to being the number one running back priority to get out of Jacksonville. This feels very kind of Bucky Irving esque, which is last year, and obviously that's not what I'm comparing him to as a style, but just a hey, I hope this guy actually is in an average running back room and ends up making the most of it, and he usurps the guy, which is what Bucky Irving did to Rachaad White last year, which Rachaad basically very inefficient back-to-back years, but just had all the volume, all the touches, all the catches, and all the rushing touchdowns. So Bucky Irving comes in and is much better, doesn't have the fumbling problems, and averages way over 5 yards a touch, and makes the most of his opportunity. And so he was the league winner because he was going to 150s to 170s. I expected that was going to be exactly where he would be in Bhayshul. Obviously, there's opportunity because it is a running back by committee room. Travis Etienne, there was rumors of him possibly being moved on from around the draft, and it is a contract year, so you never know if this is going to be a, hey, we're going to just run him into the ground, or if it's just, hey, he's very expendable. This is just hot hand approach, like we've seen recently with him battling injuries or just being underwhelming, so to speak, in the last year and a half or so. Tank Bigsby has been serviceable as a RB2 or spot starter in his looks, but he's just another guy. But even LaQuint Allen, they drafted a second running back in this draft. He is actually somebody that we had ranked higher than Bhayshul, and I just think he adds more of a traditional approach. So Tuten, man, I just can't get there as a top 40 running back, as a potential RB1 for the team. I understand Liam Cohen coming from Tampa Bay. They're going to be making a huge approach and priority to make this offense more potent and more of a high scoring approach. But I mean, there's just a ton of mouths to feed in that backfield, and I'm just not confident in putting him atop of that board right now for that team specific. But somebody that has been established and has been a very serviceable RB2 or 1B rather is Jaylen Warren. He's been playing side by side with Najee Harris in recent years, and both of them just kind of complemented each other very well. From a fantasy perspective, Jaylen did have a really successful year in 2023 where he had over 1,000 all-purpose yards, had a ton of catches, and PPR stats which is always good, especially on a DraftKings platform. But last year, it kind of came down to earth a little bit with the offensive line woes, and offense was one of the worst, and sore spots to watch, especially in the second half of the year. And he truly didn't benefit in getting a ton of important touches. 38 receptions was basically cut at about 60% of his workload from the previous year. 820 yards is not incredibly impressive based on the amount of workload and touches he had, finishing as RB39. And then I know Najee is now no longer in the picture, but right now they just drafted on day 2 Caleb Johnson, who was one of the top running backs in the class. And I don't expect him to just keep the job from him the entire season. Maybe because Caleb doesn't really have a ton of upside as a pass catcher, similar to Najee Harris. He keeps most of the 2-minute work, but at the same time, even if they start the season in a 50-50 split in terms of workload, this isn't something that Jaylen Warren is just going to increase from there. It is either going to stay lateral or it is going to just be, hey, I hope he gets hurt so Jaylen can make the most. And the running back position, we can't just always be in the mindset of, hey, I hope the other guy gets hurt so the guy that I drafted works out. Because yes, that'll work on every single player. Can't really get behind that. So RB, man, that's pretty rich for me. Going for somebody that really didn't make the most of the opportunity last year. 8 points a game. There's really not a ceiling with him of 20-point upside. I mean, maybe if Caleb goes down, but again, I could say that for a lot of people. But with Caleb in the fold and him, I don't really see a ton of consistent floors of 12 to 15 fantasy points. I see more along the lines of 7 to 10. On top of that, Pittsburgh's offense is going to be one of the worst grinded out offenses that you can imagine this year. Whether they go with Mason Rudolph, Will Howard, or this Aaron Rodgers saga ends up working out to where he brings himself to Pittsburgh, which I don't know if that's going to happen at this point. But even if it does, what did it really do for the Jets last year? And he's going into a position where there's more skilled players. Man, I really just am not interested in investing my best ball money in Pittsburgh skill players right now. Jumping over to the Giants, Tyrone Tracy. He actually did have a really successful rookie year. Last year, having over 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns. It finished as RB26, which, again, going in the 140s to 160s, which is what he was most of the year. That really worked out based on his ADP. But now it's vaulted up where he's a 8th to 9th round pick. And on top of that, they invest draft capital higher than what they drafted him with in 2024, getting Cam Scatterboo out of Arizona State. And obviously, they are different styles of running back, and is a good possibility that they end up just kind of being complementary to one another, and then they just go high hand approach towards the end of the game. But man, we're gonna say this all summer long, that Giant schedule is so horrid. The first 12 games, they are going to be underdogs and, possibly be 2 touchdown dogs in a lot of them. It's just a really rough schedule to get behind. I believe the star ratings that fantasy pros have in terms of scheduling matchup from a fantasy perspective from the prior year, they're by far the bottom for most of the positions, but running back especially. So it's just one of those things where, on top of the tough matchups, I'm not necessarily convinced he's going to keep the job throughout the whole year from Cam Scatterboo. And on top of that, if that's the case, maybe he loses out on the goal line touches and important stuff to where he's just like hey, man, he's a 5 to 8 point a game guy. And if you have that possibility and it actually is very, very decent, I don't really see myself, spending a ton of ownership on getting one of those guys. But at the end of the day, what I would recommend is, if you are interested in, and you just don't believe me and my vibes currently of him being a bad ADP, go ahead and stack. We've seen it time and time again with ADPs in this range where it's just you're trying to guess the correct running back. Instead of taking a stand like we mistakenly did last year, for example, with Zeke and Rico Dowdle, we didn't like either, but we're just taking a stand because they're on the Cowboys at the time. 3 straight 12-5 seasons. You thought it'd be one of the better offenses. One of them is going to work out. And instead of stacking them both, we're like, no, it's just going to be Zeke. Zeke ends up getting cut. Rico in the fantasy playoffs last year, 3 straight 100-yard games. So it's one of those things where you just never know. And say Tyrone Tracy, you are right. He ends up being the guy the first half of the season. Well, maybe that tells off and Cam Scottaboo is the guy at the very end making it work. And if you drafted both and you went boom, boom at the 8-9 turn, at the end of the day, you got the Giants running back as your RB3 to 4. And I think that could be very, very serviceable as a tandem, more so than just trying to guess on which one is going to hit it at the right time. Jumping over to another rookie, there are a few rookies on this list. Matthew Golden going to the Green Bay Packers after breaking out this year with Texas. It's just one of those things. Even though they did invest first-round draft capital on a receiver for the first time in over 20 years, it's just really tough to trust this receiver room and just defining a consistent role for any of these guys. Last year was a huge mistake in that regard because coming off a huge wildcard win, coming down to the wire against San Francisco, all these receivers, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Dobbs, were fighting around the top 100 range throughout most of the best fall season. You had Jaden Reed all the way in the 60s at the 5-6 turn, and then Christian Watson was at the 6-7 turn. And it's just like, I even said this a lot last year. I was like, somebody's going to be way wrong. And I just kind of really only invested in Jaden Reed and Christian Watson. And guess what? There wasn't a single right answer. Every one of them busted out on their ADP. I know it had a little bit to do with Jordan Love getting injured early, but at the end of the day, it's happened, and that just can't be the only excuse. You just can't have all your receivers bust in terms of ADP. That was just kind of one of the eye-opening things. At least Romeo Dobbs and Dontavian Wicks, their ADPs have dropped like a rock way down this year. So now it's kind of more so, hey, Jaden Reed, Matthew Golden, you're going in around the 7th, 8th round. But the thing that's a little surprising to me is that Matthew has already usurped him and being the ADP wide receiver 1 for Green Bay. And I'm not necessarily certain that he's going to have a continuous role and just have consistency. We even saw Jaden Reed in his rookie year where he, averaged a respectable 13 points. Well, one, his ADP was in like the 130s or 40s. It was 2 years ago at this point. Don't know the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure it was like, hey, you're a 12th round pick. So if it works out, it works out. And that is a good return on investment. But 13 points a game for a 7th, 8th round, it's okay. But is it good on win you stuff? I don't really know. And so with him, I'm not even necessarily convinced that him and Jaden Reed, I just feel like they're going to be swapping good games and duds. And it's going to just be way, way too high low. And obviously, that is more helpful that it is a best ball format to where you don't have to start him and make those kinds of decisions. But I'm just really not interested after seeing every single one of those receivers finish outside the top 40 in terms of points per game last year. Only one of them of the bunch in the last 2 years, which was Jaden Reed in 2023, has finished as a top 40 wide receiver in terms of points per game. I just want more consistency out of my wide receiver 3 or 4, and he's going right around those ranges of Stephon Diggs, Jacoby Myers, who have really, truly no competition. And if that's the guy, cool. But if it's not, their complementary or the alternative is way, way lower in ADP to where you can just invest in those guys. That's just kind of where I'm at. Green Bay is just one of those weird situations. And then jumping over to somebody who did have a career worst year, Deebo Samuel. Yeah, he was awful last year. There's no other way to put it. He's been one of the staples in, the last 3 years prior as, consistent. But hey, I hope you stay healthy. He has dealt with soft tissue stuff, minor injuries throughout because he does play hard and physical. But last year was just not it. And it wasn't, even though it is an offense that had a ton of bodies, ton of mouths to feed. Christian McCaffrey missed most of the season with both of his Achilles having sprain, soreness, whatever ended up being the diagnosis, and then having the calf injury to end this season. Jordan Mason went down. Brandon Ayuk was banged up. The only one that really stayed healthy throughout the whole year was George Kittle. And it's not like George Kittle has taken away so many touches to where these guys can't also be a factor in terms of fantasy football. Yeah, he was just very, very bad last year. And going over to Washington, this was truly the first move of the offseason. And it's a fun one on paper. But at the same time, it's not like Washington, even though they did have one of the most exciting and high-flying offenses in the NFL, there wasn't really a consistent player outside of Terry McLaurin. He basically got you 16 to 22 week in and week out from a PPR perspective. Very consistent, and it's warranted that he's the 3rd-round pick. But the wide receiver 2, sometimes it was Noah Brown, sometimes it was De'Ami Brown. Gertz had a game or two. You had Brian Robinson do okay and then do not okay. Austin Eckler didn't really do anything. So it was truly just legs from Jaden Daniels and the consistency of Terry McLaurin. So I don't really see anything, especially coming off a down year. Deebo getting up there another year, having injury issues. 5-6 turns sounds ridiculous in that regard. I know this is in chronological order in reverse in terms of these ranked. This isn't my least favorite to favorite or vice versa. If I had to rank, he might be towards the top of my least favorite ADPs overall for both best ball platforms. I don't plan on getting any shares of him currently at this ADP. And now somebody that we talked about, we even had a whole video dedicated to him and his recent move, and that's George Pickens, the new Dallas Cowboy. Obviously, he's really, truly the only move that has happened since the draft, which has been over a month at this point, now that we're getting into June. But when we first did best ball drafts right before this trade happened, like a week before it happened, he was in the 90s on DraftKings and Underdog. I think he was kind of right around that range too. And I was just like, hey, I can kind of get behind that if you want to be a little optimistic, because at that time he was like wide receiver 47, wide receiver 48. And I'm like, he's talented enough to where in best ball platforms at the very least, he'll have a couple more games to warrant that ADP. And then he gets traded, and I'm like, hey, if you stay within a round and a half, I'm all for it. Wide receiver 2 really kind of defined role, because other than Jake Ferguson, there's nobody fantasy relevant from a pass catcher perspective to complement CeeDee Lamb, who is truly the alpha in that offense. And then the running game wise, they didn't really add a ton. They should be trailing more this year. Obviously, we brought up the schedule. But then he jumped 4 rounds. And then it's just like, I'm good. I'm good at that spot. Wide receiver 30, that's going before Calvin Ridley. That's going before Chris Godwin. That's going before Jordan Addison, Jacoby Myers, Stephon Diggs. We mentioned those with a couple guys prior. And I'm just not there with him. I think he might be one of the biggest differences as well, in addition to Deebo, who we just talked about, in terms of least favorite right now. And maybe that was a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction, because right now we're in OTAs. We're about to be in training camp in a month. And basically anytime somebody's thighs look pretty sexy, anytime there's this guy that makes a one-handed catch, anytime this guy looks at the camera in a funny way, he's going to go viral, and that's going to jump his ADP up a bunch of spots. That's just how this game works. When you're in the news, things go well for you in terms of ADP. So maybe because of him being the only trade in recent marks, he just kind of it was a little bit of an overcorrection, and maybe he'll start to kind of jump down below those guys. But I think he's a whole tier below the guys I mentioned. And if he kind of starts to fall below that, back into the 7th round, maybe I'll kind of take him off this list and start getting a couple of shares. But this is one of those ones that I hope you got him in the 90s when you did, when we first started in late April, early May, with these best ball contests. Otherwise, right now, I'm not really touching George. This one that we have is RJ Harvey, a rookie running back for the Denver Broncos. This one's a very unique one, because I loved the situation that happened with RJ, because he is somebody that we did truly like as a talent, as a platform. Throughout last year, we were kind of, Emery and Dusty especially, were kind of raving about him going overlooked and being underrated, having a breakout year. Obviously, he was among our top 15 running backs in this class. We actually ranked him in the top 100 in our overall prospects. That was even higher than some of the other guys in terms of consensus, being in the hundreds, 110s, even 115. So that's like 4th round territory, right? On top of that, him being 24 years old. But then Denver reached on him. Ended up spending the 60th overall pick, which was about 40 spots higher than most people would expect in terms of ADP. Javonte Williams is out the door, so it's just like, hey, running back room is open. A lot of people had them picking Omar and Hampton in the 1st round. So he inherits a really good situation and opportunity with an offense that really broke out last year, and just sorely looking for somebody to be consistent in the run game. And so I was like, okay, this is going to be a fun one. He's going to be in the running back 28 to 30 range. He'll be in the Tony Pollard and Aaron Jones tier, and maybe he'll be a little overlooked because it's just hard to trust that backfield, because we saw Javonte not get goal line touches to a 5'7" running back in Jaleel McLaughlin. Audric Estime, who we liked as a 20th round pick last year and who did really well in college, didn't really make the most of the opportunity. It was just a true running back by committee approach throughout the season. So maybe some people are a little pessimistic and he goes in that range. We'll get some flyers. We're going to draft some rookies. And then, good God, was I wrong about that ADP range prediction. He truly started out in the 50s, and he has not left at all. And on top of that, people are raving about him at OTAs, and RB17 is pretty much where he's just going to stay. He's going to be between 15 and 20 throughout the rest of the summer. And he's just going to go in this range as one of the high-end RB2s in terms of being drafted and invested. And it's really disappointing, because I do like him, but he's going right around Cortland Sutton and his own teammate. And right now, it's just one of those things where I'm not even sure if I'd rank him higher than a Quinshon Judkins or Travion Henderson, or there's even veteran running backs like James Conner or Kenneth Walker that I think can provide upside and consistency more so than RJ. And it's just one of those guys. Sometimes you got to take stands where you like a guy, but this range, you got to pick somebody to be underweight on or fade entirely. And it's not like I hate him as a player. I just wish he was going later in drafts. And, he's just going to, I guess, be a 50th overall player throughout the rest of the summer. that's kind of disappointing based on what I thought might have happened with his ADP. And then jumping over to another rookie, Tetairoa McMillan, basically at the 4-5 turn, another one of those guys where I thought I'm going to rank him. I don't know where, and I was doing a rough range. And again, we'll have a finalized list that we'll start putting out our 1.0 rankings in the coming weeks. But I thought he'll be in the mid to late 20s in terms of overall wide receivers. And then it just kind of depends on where his ADP is and if we want to be overweight or underweight based on how we view him and rank him compared to others, because he was the best receiver in this class. And he goes to a situation where they sorely needed a wide receiver one because Xavier Legette coming off a down year, Adam Thielen aging again, and somebody just needs to step up to be the go-to guy for Bryce Young. Tetairoa ends up going to Carolina. I like the fit. It's fun. But it's not like they're necessarily potent offense that's going to have 10 touchdown upside for anybody outside of maybe a Chuba Hubbard who broke out last year in the absence of Jonathan Brooks for the most part. Yeah, it's just one of those weird team, kind of a weird situation. He's in a weird range. Overall, going in underdog is really, really, really rich for me. That is the fourth smack dab middle to even approaching the early fourth round. Man, I just can't really get there. I just can't. That's right around the range of Kansas City wide receivers, Jay Moore, a lot of really talented wide receiver ones that we know are going to be averaging, 12 to 15 as a floor, and then having that 100-yard upside, multi-touchdown upside in Tet. I know we had a ton of rookie receivers that went off last year, finished well. Ladd McConkey was wide receiver 13. Brian Thomas, Malik Neighbors, both top 7. Even Marvin Harrison, very, very much underwhelmed in terms of ADP, but still had 8 touchdowns, still was, in the 30s. And you expect some kind of improvement. I think it's going to be a tough thing to have consistency for Tet. Could be wrong. Maybe it's just a trend now that rookie wide receivers just have to be just as much of a priority, and you can expect them to immediately translate as well. But we also have seen a track record of rookie wide receivers underwhelming in terms of ADP. And it's just one of those things right now. Like, I would have ranked him at the mid to late 20s. He's going early to mid 20s. Not really a value to me right now. And there's other guys that are going past him that I think might provide a little bit more. And on top of that, he's going in a range where it's just like, hey, I hope he's your wide receiver 3. There are certain guys, this is how I kind of tier him, is how do I feel about him if he's my wide receiver 1 or my wide receiver 2? Obviously, way better at this than that, and then so on and so forth. So with him, he's going in a range where you're deciding your wide receiver 2s and 3s. If he's your wide receiver 3 and you start off early and you're just hitting receivers left and right, and you start off with like a Jamar Chase, and then on the turn, you're going this guy, and then Tet, you're just going to load it up and then figure out the running backs later, like, that's cool. But if you're going double running back early, and then you're going to invest in, later receivers, and you're going to take a risk with the Garrett Wilson or Marvin Harrison in the 3rd round, and then you're going to follow up with Tet in the 4th, man, you better go heavy at receiver. And receiver is a position that I've tried to, or we tried rather, in recent years to just hit heavy early, so you don't have to do the 8-9 wide receiver builds, because obviously, especially in DraftKings where it is PPR, both of them have bonuses, and you can play up to 4 of them instead of up to 3 of them, because it's a 2-3 with the flex build for this style of play. So that's just kind of one of the things with him, is like, I like him, don't love him. ADP is just kind of okay, but I hope if you do invest in him early that he is, one of your depth pieces at wide receiver, instead of one of your huge priorities. And then jumping into the first couple rounds, so T. Higgins, obviously he had a breakout year and he's been the talk because multi-years trying to look for an extension. They finally invest and give it to him. And right now he's going as basically the last wide receiver 1 at the 2-3 turn. And I know exactly why, because Jamar Chase is the 101 or 102, depending on where you're drafting. But right now on both DraftKings and Underdog, he is the 101 for ADP. And then naturally, you want to double stack and single stack guys. The problem is that it just felt much better when Obviously Jamar was a top 5 pick last year. T. Higgins was going at the 4-5 turn, and at the 6-7 turn, you get Joe Burrow. And then after the breakout years of Joe Burrow, being one of the top 5 quarterbacks, T. Higgins did get injured, missed 5 games, but averaged 18 points a game, which was top 7, I believe, in terms of PPR points. Really kind of vaulted things up, and because you're doing the stack thing, obviously he wasn't going to be the end of the 4th round. So it pushed him up into the early 3rd, late 2nd. And I'm just not there. If I do go the chase route, I understand it. Starting off with the double stack. But I mean, there's been a lot of injuries before. There's the in and outs. There's inconsistencies in terms of having a solid floor every week. Obviously, last year he won whoever $1 million because his best game was saved for the championship week, where he dropped 44 fantasy points in the championship round. But it's not like something I'm going to bank on. In recent years, we've been seeing a lot of wide receiver 2s in high potent offenses going at the 2-3 turn because of stackable ability, like a Jaylen Waddle and Tyreek Hill before Devontae Smith and AJ Brown. And it's just like, hey, they do fine, but it's not nearly worth the ADP of a 2nd, 3rd round pick. So T. Higgins right now, borderline wide receiver 1. And he's going before Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison, Tyreek Hill, all these guys. And it's just like, hey, no, I know you're going to be good, but at the point in which you're being drafted, you need to be great. And we have to fade some of these guys up top. I hate the 2nd round, especially on the back end. And he's just one of those guys where I just really don't want to get to unless I have Chase. And even if I do have Chase, I still don't feel great about having to force my hand that way, because at that point, when you do draft both, you have to pick Joe Burrow in the 4th or 5th round. And then it's just like, hey, where else am I going to get the depth and all that good stuff? And then wrapping it up, he was one of the league winners last year, Bucky Irving, as a 15th, 16th round pick in best ball, and then probably a waiver wire pickup in your redraft league. And he ends up taking the job from Rachaad White for good in about the 3rd way of the season. Way more consistent and efficient. Has 8 touchdowns, 47 receptions, 1,500 total yards. Ends up as a high-end RB2, but league winner. And the thing is, they didn't really add anybody in terms of draft. I really did think that with the depth of this class, that they would have added somebody to complement, even if it's not take his job. Because Bucky, we did like him as a prospect, did not love him. We didn't think he could handle a full-time workload, which he did in spades last year. But we thought get a power back or something of that nature, and Ollie Gordon, somebody in the late rounds that, hey, can handle big-time workloads and goal line touches, and Bucky Irving can get the important ones in the goal line, pass catching situations, 2-minute drills, which is where he really thrived, And last year, we actually did get a decent amount of Bucky because we truly just did not believe in Rachaad White because of back-to-back years where he was very inefficient, but just got 100% of the touches and all the important ones with Tampa Bay, one of the worst and least efficient running games. But it's just like he got 10 touchdowns and he got 5-6 targets, and he just inherited that. And then last year he was a 4th round pick, and we were just like, that is our fade. We're not doing that. And then now, a better version of him, because obviously Bucky Irving has been more productive in the NFL to this point in his small sample size. But now it's a 2nd round pick. And you're going right around the range of Jonathan Taylor and before Josh Jacobs and Chase Brown, who kind of a similar style player in a similar situation. You're going to a full round after that. It's just one of those things where, again, you have to fade some guys. And usually in the 1st round, again, we can fade. We find a couple guys that we just truly are like, we're taking stands on. This year, it's a little bit harder in that regard. But one of the guys, because he's going right around Devon Achane, Jonathan Taylor, guys that we feel a little better about as players and prospects, or not prospects, but just talents in general. Yes, 2 things can be true. He has all the opportunity in the world, and yes, his ceiling was what it was last year, and that still only got him to RB13. So right now, him going RB9 is just kind of not great value for us. He's going to be outside of our top 10. in terms of running backs, and if he's going to be that, it's just going to be somebody that we're going to be underweight to. So with that being said, we are wrapping up our first 1.0 fantasy hates list. That was 10 ADPs that we did not like. Please, once again, let us know what you thought about the guys that we selected. What am I wrong? What are we wrong about? More me, because I don't mind biting the bullet if I am wrong. But tell us what you think, what you agree with, what you don't, who you are fading at the moment. And again, this is a fluid list because ADPs are going to change based on news, like we said, and things can change, or we can feel differently about something. Injuries can happen to where things seem even better, and it's just like, oh, okay. Again, I mentioned George Pickens. Don't love him at all because his ADP just rose way too much. But hey, what if it was overinflated because of the news, and he'll drop a couple spots, maybe a round or two? I'm a little more interested. But then some guys were just like, I don't feel good about you, and you're gonna stay there, and I don't like it. So it is what it is. But we appreciate you guys tuning in. We're gonna be doing our 10 ADPs that we love starting next week, and then we're gonna get into some fantasy rankings in the coming weeks. A whole lot of content once again, streaming every Thursday night with best ball. Even though the finals are coming out this Thursday, or starting with game one, we're still going to be live, having fun, drafting a couple teams, making some friends along the way, joining and increasing this community. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. Going to be doing it the rest of the summer. We can't wait for you guys to join. And until then, we hope you guys have a good one.